open-world action RPG ELEX II has landed on Mac computers. Originally developed by German developer Piranha Bytes and published by THQ Nordic, the Mac port has been worked on by the THQ Nordic Mac port developers. Today, we're going to have an in-depth look at how the game has been built for Mac and its performance on a range of Apple Silicon Macs. The game is officially supported on all Apple Silicon-based Macs and is officially supported on the following Intel-based Macs with AMD graphics cards. It's not very often that we get a big AAA open-world game like ELEX II on Mac. ELEX II offers players a vibrant world to explore, featuring 5 major factions, each with their own captivating story arc for players to engage with and experience. You follow Jax, who must once again unite the free people of the science fantasy world of Magellan against a new threat. The combat is not outstanding, reminding me of early 2000s action games, but their story, atmosphere, and world are pretty stellar. From the get-go, ELEX II was made to run natively on Apple Silicon through the ARM64 architecture. However, it also supports the x86-64 architecture. This means it can be played on select AMD Macs and plays great on them. I've been told that the Metal Performance HUD was used for QA benchmarking the game across over 15 Macs in the offices too. In fact, game cooking and packaging was fully done on Mac and not a single aspect was done on Windows PC. ELEX II for Mac has been in development for only a short period of time. It took a little over 8 months to produce and was done by a small team of only 4+ people. The THQ Nordic Mac port developers worked closely with the Metal engineers, using Xcode 13 as the main build tool and Xcode 14 as the main development tool, and macOS 13 Ventura and macOS 12 Monterey as the target OSs. The DirectX 12 API from the original version of the game was used as a building foundation for the Mac port too. In fact, no features were compromised or not ported over with Metal. That being said, some challenges did come up with development on this platform, most notably tessellation shaders. THQ told me the conversion of normal HLSL shaders into Metal-based approaches was tricky. This was due to major differences of tessellation between DirectX 11, DirectX 12, and Metal. There was a significant use of tessellation in effects, fire, water, etc., and extremely tessellated objects, alien lifeforms, for example. Still, in the end, nothing was compromised. Every aspect of tessellation was preserved. THQ also informed me that another big challenge for us was converting a DirectX 12 game to Metal. DirectX 12 is a bit more low-level than Metal and has a different approach to managing resources. DirectX 11 is still the best and the easiest API to convert to Metal for us. DirectX 12, with its added complexity, is much more challenging. Hopefully this will change with time as Metal will gain more DirectX 12 features. ELEX II is one of the first titles to fully embrace ICB, which is Indirect Command Buffer, approach on Mac. This is a completely GPU-driven pipeline with an ICB buffer filled at the end of the culling process. There are more than 6+ GPU culling segments in the frame, with ICB used in every segment. ELEX II is one of the few titles that use source-based shader conversion with readable and optimized text shader on output. Most ports out there use shader converters, which take original compiled shader and decompile it to intermediate language and transfer the result to Metal. The resulting shader becomes unreadable to the normal human eye. Working and optimizing such shaders are extremely painful. Slang Tool was ported to macOS with the source level HLSL to Metal 2 conversion. The game fully embraces argument buffers for passing textures and samplers inside shaders too. It's cool to note, if nothing is happening in the frame, zero argument encoding is occurring. The game uses pre-filled buffers. Placed heaps are used for seamless conversion between on-fly generated light probes, BC4 and BC6. The game runs on Metal 2.4, but why not Metal 3? Metal 2.4 means the game can be supported on macOS 12 Monterey, which a large number of users are still running on their Mac. Metal 2.4 means the game can be supported on select AMD Intel Macs, as a number of Metal 3 features are not supported there. Metal 3 isn't always going to equal a better game. Some of the features in this framework are totally redundant for certain games and developers. ELEX II supports the separate MetalFX upscaling API via the temporal variant. Just note, MetalFX is only available in macOS 13 Ventura and beyond. It's not supported in macOS Monterey. Performance mode uses 25% screen scaling, and quality mode uses 15% screen scaling. THQ told me Apple suggests setting 50%, but for us it makes the image too blurry. Percentages were all determined by eye. I always like to briefly go over controller support in Mac ports. Unlike on Windows PC, ELEX II has full controller support on Mac and comes with controller rumble support and haptic feedback on PS5 controllers. It also has on-the-fly keyboard and gamepad switching, a small feature I know, but I thought I'd mention it. But what about performance-wise? Let's have a look at how the game performs across a range of Apple Silicon machines. First, let's go over the lowest possible denominator, pure M1. Pause the video now for the specs of my M1 13-inch MacBook Pro. On Apple M1 based Macs, THQ recommends a native display resolution of 1440 by 900, or if you're connected to an external monitor, 1600 by 900. Then disable VSync, put quality to medium settings, and MetalFX on performance. These settings provide about 30 to 45 FPS. M1 Macs are becoming less ideal now for running the latest AAA games, so it took quite a bit of work for THQ and Apple to get them supported for ELEX II. Most scenes in the game run okay on M1, staying above 30 FPS, and that is quite good to see. That being said, there are a few scenes that really hurt performance on these machines, going down as low as 20 FPS. I hope the developer can improve this as it ruins the experience. Next, let's take a look at Apple M2. Please pause the video now for the specs of my M2 based Macs. On an Apple M2 based Mac, THQ recommends a native display resolution of 1440 by 900, or 1470 by 956, or 1710 by 1107, or if you're connected to an external monitor, 1600 by 900. Then disable VSync, put all settings to high, but vegetation quality and render range to medium, and MetalFX to quality. These settings provide about 30 to 50 FPS on average. Again, 60 FPS is just not really possible on these machines, at least at a reasonably high resolution and advanced settings. Unlike pure M1, this game does a better job at mostly staying above 30 FPS on M2 in most areas, which is good to see. That being said, the same demanding locations or scenes still have negative effects on the FPS on M2, such as Bastion and for the outskirts of the fort, where it sometimes drops below 30 FPS, but it isn't as bad as M1, as I said. The jump in performance over M1 is not substantial, I'll be honest. These chips are still not amazing for big games, but you can get by, I guess. Moving on, it's time to look at the Apple M1 Pro. Please pause the video now for the specs of my 14-inch M1 Pro MacBook Pro. On an Apple M1 Pro based Mac, THQ recommends a native display resolution of 1728 by 1117 or 1512 by 982, or if you're connected to an external monitor, 1920 by 1080. Disable VSync, put all settings to high, but vegetation quality and render range to medium, and MetalFX to quality. These settings provide about 30 to 55 FPS on average. There are some challenging scenes that tank the FPS to 30, especially flying around or when engaging in combat within Tavar, if that's the right place. Very much so, it's affected there. I wish 60 FPS was more achievable here, but right now it's simply not at, even 1080p high settings, which is a little bit annoying. Still, the game at least looks really good on this machine now, visually. Let's now move on to M2 Pro. Please pause the video now for the specs of my M2 Pro Mac Mini. On an Apple M2 Pro based Mac, THQ recommends a native display resolution of 1728 by 1117 or 1512 by 982, or if you're connected to an external monitor, 1920 by 1080. Disable VSync, put all settings to high, but vegetation quality and render range to medium, and MetalFX to quality. It's the same settings as M1 Pro. These settings usually provide about 40 to 60 FPS on average. The thermal management in this Mac Mini is excellent, so it should maintain a more consistent frame rate than, let's say, a 14-inch or 16-inch MacBook Pro. It rarely goes much lower than 40 FPS on this machine, and I'm happy with that. Now it's time to look at Apple M1 Max. Pause the video now for the specs of my 16-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro. On an Apple M1 Max-based Mac, THQ recommends a native display resolution of 1728 by 1117 or 1512 by 982, or if you're connected to an external monitor, 1920 by 1080. Disable VSync, put all settings to high, and MetalFX to quality. This machine can finally push for 60 FPS at high settings. That being said, it will drop below 60 FPS quite frequently, which is a bit annoying. It's also unfortunate that it's only 1080p, especially for such an expensive machine. Still, it's mostly enjoyable here, and the game looks gorgeous at high settings, completely high settings. Now it's time to look at M2 Max. Pause the video now for the specs of my 16-inch M2 Max MacBook Pro. On an Apple M2 Max machine, THQ recommends a native display resolution 1728 by 1117 or 1512 by 982. Or, if you're connected to an external monitor, 1920 by 1080. Disable VSync, put all settings to high, and MetalFX to quality. It's the same settings as M1 Max. This machine does a better job at achieving usually about 60 FPS and can go above that in some circumstances, quite a bit too. Sometimes, all that being said, it will still drop below 60 FPS. often, but not nearly as much as M1 Max. I was really hoping M1 and M2 Max would be able to achieve this performance at 1440p, but unfortunately, no. Our last Apple Silicon chip to look at is M1 Ultra. Pause the video now for the specs of my M1 Ultra Mac Studio. On an Apple M1 Ultra based Mac, THQ recommends a resolution of 2560 by 1440. Disable VSync, put all settings to high and MetalFX to quality. These settings can also be applied to M2 Ultra Mac Studio, or Mac Pro if anyone is stupid enough to have one of those for gaming. The M2 Mac Pro for gaming. Sorry about that, guys. I really wanted this machine to be better. Like 4K would have been really good. But it seems it's best played at 1440p for around 60 FPS. Finally, let's see how the game fares on an Intel AMD Mac. Pause the video now for the specs of my 2020 5K iMac. For this graphics card, it's recommended to play at 1600 by 900. Disable VSync, put almost all settings to high, and post AA on FXAA. At the moment, MetalFX is disabled specifically for AMD Macs. If you enable it, a blue screen may appear like this one. As you can see, it's about 30 to 60 FPS on this machine in this state. There are some slight challenges with performance, mind you, especially when using the jetpack. Ooh, this needs to be improved. Overall, that's basically the main issue. I would say the performance on AMD Macs goes to show that these aging Intel AMD Macs can still somewhat handle modern AAA games, and it doesn't all have to be left for just Apple Silicon, even though Apple says it does. It doesn't. What's also crazy to think about is that the performance here is in between pure Apple M1 and Apple M2 Mac Performance. Let that sink in. This performance was never possible in the past with an integrated Intel Mac. And now you can see it on, let's say, a MacBook Air. What do you think of the Mac port of ELEX II? Are you impressed or disappointed? While the performance isn't anything to write home about, I think the technology involved in the Mac port is impressive and shows that within only a short time frame, a big DirectX 12 AAA game can be ported over to Mac with acceptable performance. Anyway, leave a like if you enjoyed this review, and subscribe and turn on notifications to stay up to date with future Mac game ports. I think the next one will be Fort Solis in late August and Baldur's Gate 3 in maybe September. I also want to quickly say a massive thank you to THQ for collaborating with me on this video. I've never worked so closely with a developer before, seeing all the behind the scenes and so forth. We've been working on this video kind of together for quite a few weeks now, and I'm really proud of what we've done together. So just thank you so much. I'm really grateful for working with you in this way. And yeah, cool, thanks. My name's Stewie, and thanks for watching.